All right. I got them. There were three of them. Sorry, guys, I didn't look at it.
Hacked in.
Yeah, no, it's an open meeting, so people can come in. I do have a waiting room enabled here, and if I put them in the waiting room, they're gone, which is what I did.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that, guys.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say,
We may expect free cash to be higher than the,
Why don't we
the
go out?
8 million.
there goes my tech job, right?
So Liz, we have a projection for 25 of 8.3.
Yes, and as discussed at our forecasting meeting, Kevin mentioned that that figure may be slightly higher as we, get closer to the end of FY 25.
Yeah. Higher by what? A million?
$1 million. That's a safe.
So that's the seesaw effect that I was speaking of earlier. So,
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
yeah. So then if you believe that, then you drop a deficit down to about 700,000.
No, actually.
Well, it's still, that's still,
Deficit, go back down and change that 2 million to 3.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Go down a little bit.
Yeah,
That number, change that from 2 million to 3.
I'll live billing. Bill got traumatized and logged off.
There you go. Now you can see what happens. So now we end up with 10.6.
Yeah.
At the end of 25, but then we drop at the end of 6, just barely below 10.
I think that's a little bit more
Realistic.
realistic, yeah.
Didn't know.
The trend is the same.
Yes.
Long-term lookout is the same. That hasn't really changed.
Anybody else,
That's a guy normally.
anybody else want to comment on the forecast? Thank you.
Oh, real quick.
Yes.
Just on the, that change in numbers there. Is the reason the, 500 for the out years, that's just a very conservative approach, even though we've returned 2 and 4. Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so
I just be curious if it was like bumped up to 1 million, if that would change the,
Another wild card we didn't talk about is new growth. I think we got 1.4 million under new growth. 1444 for 26. I think Kevin was talking about 1.5 and going, well, it's $60,000.
That is 7-figure, 1.5.
So.
Wait a minute, Kevin is more optimistic than you and I are?
By 60 grand.
I'm telling you, that's amazing.
We'll be.
He must be on something.
But that is another wild card because we couldn't get more than that.
Yeah.
We could get less too.
That's true.
And if you change those, then.
So basically, these are all our best guesses.
just curious.
Yeah.
When it goes negative, right?
A lot of best guesses.
right, forecast. Go ahead.
Just a question. So we have our surveillance call in June. Do we have a better understanding of what like particular metrics the rating agencies are looking at? And like what threat?
They had a meeting where they said 10%, we want 15% reserves. I think which is ridiculous, but that's.
They also, I mean, they look at that, they do ask a number of, which they hadn't until recently, I'll call them quality of life issues, like what are you doing in green energy? I think they'll love that we funded the solar for the Galvin. They ask questions like that, what's your new growth like? Did you comply with the MBTA Act? And that was a question last year, which I had to answer. We are still in compliance because we weren't out of compliance yet. We had till the end of the year, but I can tell them, yes, we are in full compliance and we've been signed off by that. So, but they do look at the numbers, and I was taken aback, frankly, when they said they wanted closer to 15%.
Is that 15% just free cash or is it?
No, that's total reserve.
Reserve. So if you look at the, free cash plus stabilization, so those two are added together for reserves.
And I did talk to our bond counsel and First Southwest, and they do a lot of cities and towns. And based on today, because we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to happen with the rates, right? what's the difference if you were a AA plus versus a AAA? And they, they said could between 3 and 12 basis points. So it gives you an idea of the borrowing will be a little bit more,
But we're talking about on $100 million though.
about 100 million left.
But will be bonded for the schools based on the current ratings, is that your understanding?
No, we'll have, the last 100 will be bonded on the current rating, the new rating for that, yes.
New rating.
I assume,
And it's not to say we're not gonna have other bonding, but.
No.
For the immediate,
I mean, neutral, yeah.
That's the full bonding for the high school, correct?
The high school will be done.
any other questions, comments on the forecast look?
Are we gonna stage it? So we do the high school and then the pumper, or are we gonna do it all in one?
The pumper and the other stuff is little, I'm gonna do it all at once. And there's a reason why you do it all at once. There are there are charges that the bond council charges you, so you might as well put it all in. We have to order the pumper, we gotta clean up, Butler Ave. What was the other one? What's the only other two?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would do it all at once.
Do it all.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
design.
Question, but
yeah.
like, would the pumper have normally, what had been the duration of that borrowing had it been done separately? Is it?
No, it'll be a separate
Okay,
borrowing.
but you'll just,
I'll do, we'll do multiple borrowings at once, okay,
high school is 20, 30?
30 years. Yeah.
We do that math.
Yeah. It's like a 30-year mortgage.
Yes.
A lot of interest charges.
Yes,
The pumpers are 15.
got it. That's what I was just wondering. Yeah, okay. You're able to do them both together, but.
Oh, yeah, we've one surveillance
Yeah.
call, but they'll go out for different, we'll get one rating for different borrowings and, people will,
Right, that was probably easy.
sorry.
Silly question.
Are you got somebody else in the waiting room?
Yeah,
Well, I'm assuming it's a legitimate person.
and
No, she was on earlier.
why are you assuming? What? She's yours? Okay.
That's why.
All right, okay. All right. Thank you.
Cause I couldn't see it.
Anybody else?
Where's yours?
Any other questions, comments on the?
Anybody else can watch.
Well, Sharon, Jim. Okay, so that was the first item on the agenda. The second one was,
Right.
budget memo. So the budget memo is something that Steve, was in our Govenda in the packet Steve sends to town council. If you had a chance to look at it, it was very reflective, I think, over his, years of service, among other things. But, also, spoke about what, the theme that Dan and the forecasting committee, outlined that things are continuing to get tighter and tighter, so. And on the second page, there was some things that could be considered to help paint a little better picture. As in defer some things or approve things, but not spend money till we regroup at the second half of the year in the fall, prior to the fall meeting. So it's just something to think about. I don't know, Steve, if you want to hit on anything else. Other than
No, it was really just kind of my, thought process over the years and over working with this committee and, looking at the numbers. I do think that, and I'll start at the bottom of the steps I put out. Number one is that if we were getting fair state aid, like our neighbors are, on per pupil basis, that'd be an extra 1.5 million every year. What would that do to our forecast? We wouldn't have this discussion for the last half hour.
And even
So I think-
we would have got prior years.
Right, that is a huge issue. I do think we have to look at other areas of revenues. I was joking with the forecast committee that probably 20 years ago, I talked with about a trash fee. And I think that nobody on any committee, so what is it? 15 FinCom.
Seven others.
It was 22 to maybe 21 to 1. Oh, no, 14, including the school committee, 29 to 1, but that was okay. I think that's something we need to look at. That's a huge expense. It's $2 million a year. A lot of communities have that. And that's an expense I think is going to continue to go up. because I think we're gonna have more demands for it as well. Right now, we do not pick up trash for, units that are more than four families, so condominiums, for instance. I think at some point, there's gonna be a judge that's gonna say, you have to, if you're giving it to everybody else. So I think that's something to look at. And I think we do need to look at, delaying some items, maybe, slow rolling it till we get to the fall. I'd love to see the state come out with an OPEB funding schedule. I think they never will. We have one for retirement and we're gonna hit that goal. We're kind of, we're done very well with OPEB, extremely well with OPEB over the years. $36 million in OPEB. I don't think the state will come up with a schedule, although they're gonna study it. And the reason why I think they won't is because they put nothing into OPEB, so they're woefully behind.
State itself.
The state itself is, right? Zero.
And they won't impose anything on cities and towns until they do their themselves.
Right. So I don't think, if that will happen. And we have to carefully scrutinize all budgets, and I think we've done that, every year, since I've been here, and before. This committee does a great job of scrutinizing every budget, and I think, we do too. The department heads take a lot of pride in returning money to the town, and we've had a good run, but I think we have to kind of, I don't know, it's a brave new world. We need to relook at some things.
Nope.
And that's it. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sinking ship.
I am. Sorry.
I did see something that the House is not gonna take up the funding structure for schools again, right? Didn't the House Speaker say that they're not gonna review that? Did I read that properly? They're not gonna review
The chapter 70 formula, or I know they looked at vocational schools and how they weren't going to look about how they admit people. They were gonna they weren't gonna change that. They were gonna study it.
Yeah.
I did not see anything about it be a big change right now.
Right.
In school funding, school formula. I think that'll, be a committee and look at it, And I think they should use more of the fair share amendment for local cities and towns, and I don't see that happening right now.
And the previous governor put in there was a additional funding for schools. I forget what it was called, but Baker, we've gotten some increase in school funding.
We did have a few years ago a good, and I showed this. There was one year we had a good bump in chapter 70, 3 or 4 years ago. And that was the first, I think that was the first installment of some of that fair share money. And we really did well, but I think we've lagged and we need that again. We got halfway there. If we went the other half, we would be, home free.
Yeah, some other communities had, 15 one year and 20 the next year, and we didn't see.
Right. But we're not,
The second
we're
year.
not a gateway, so we wouldn't see that. Yeah. So
Thank you. Any
there
comments
we are.
on that? All right. That brings us to the Wakefield school budget.
Doug, if you would, and then people can see you better. You and Kara, maybe. I think Christine is on. You gonna log in, Doug? To share?
Might be able to plug in here.
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, try it. I don't know if that works. Maybe.
I can get the deck, I think.
Oh, maybe Jim will do the deck, Doug,
Okay.
if you're gonna do that. Oh, yeah, I didn't recognize Rose, sorry.
Give it my email, right?
Is a PowerPoint sent out? Who did, because I'm also on, but wait, are you looking for a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
And
I'm not on.
Jimmy sent it today at 3:08.
Yeah,
Still sent it last week.
I know. Let me find last week, that'll be easier. Send it to my office, I'm not gonna find you, but we'll see.
You can also send you that per pupil information, Jim, that you were asking about.
You can send it to your.
Does Christine have it? Does Christine have the presentation? We could have her share.
Buff, can you hear me?
Do you want me to share my screen?
Christine?
Yeah.
All right, Christine,
Can
I'm gonna
you-
give you rights.
Okay.
Okay. You should be set, Christine.
Does everybody know the people from the schools?
We can do introductions if you want.
Yeah, just say hello, please.
Um, Good evening, I'm Doug Lyons, I'm the superintendent of schools.
Karen Morrow, I'm the assistant superintendent. Nice to see all of you.
Christine, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Christine Bafagner. I'm the school business administrator for Wakefield.
Hi,
And
I'm
Rosie?
Rosie Galvin, the Director of Special Education.
Go school committee. Thank you.
You can put in presentation, view presentation mode.
Oh, sorry. Just lost it.
I guess.
You just click view, it should go into.
And under,
View, under view.
there we go.
Yep, and then just slideshow, hit slideshow. Yep.
There you go.
Good. You can see the tension that we have in our office between like the Microsoft Suite and Google Docs. It's pretty healthy,
Don't do
healthy
that.
difference. in that.
I don't-
So I'm gonna go through these slides quickly. I think a lot of you have seen them. I can kind of jump back if you'd like me to jump back. We've kind of modified the way we've collected information this year. We've surveyed families and staff, we do every year. We also make our way around and visit with every faculty and staff in an open meeting to hear their perspectives face to face, what their challenges are. And principals come in addition to that and the surveying. And they talk about building priorities and how they're making things work. These are kind of the priorities that came to us through our surveying. So we had a little over 500 responses. They're very consistent to what we learned through the surveys and also what we learned in person. Staff overwhelmingly talk about the challenges with multilingual learners and the increased numbers and the complexity and range of needs of the students that are coming in. One of the things that I highlighted on Saturday morning when we talked about multilingual learners, if you go to the next slide. One of the things that I talked about, or I and Kara both talked about on Saturday morning, we presented to FinCom. It's just not only increase in numbers, but the numbers don't equal need. And so not everyone is at the same level of need. Not everyone is at the same academic level. Not everyone is at the same kind of level in regard to elementary, middle, high. And the example that I use is, for example, when we have a multilingual learner that comes into the district that has very little or no English, and they are in middle school or high school, and they're supposed to be scheduled 2 periods a day for support, and then 3 other periods for academic classes. The assumption there is that they'll be learning enough language, English, with support to participate thoughtfully in math, English, science, and social studies. And that's just not the case with the gaps that a lot of our students are arriving with. And the difference between a high schooler or a middle schooler that might be in that space that has those gaps is that a kindergartner or a first grader can jump in and learn social language with their peers, because in the lower grades, they're not only learning content, but they're also learning how to learn. right? That's part of what the goal of schooling is at K and 1. We're teaching students how to participate thoughtfully with their peers, how to, how to participate and learn not only bits and pieces of the curriculum, but also how to interact, how to give and take, how to take people's perspectives. So that's a quick piece that I think it's always important for us to make in regard to the nuances of educating the range of needs within the numbers. If you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think not to go into too much detail, but we really just wanted to highlight the increase that we're seeing across the district in terms of multilingual learners and their needs, which, you know, the more students we have, the more staffing that is needed, more curriculum resources. And as Doug said, in sometimes it's designing an individual curriculum for students, definitely small group. And we also have to meet learning minutes that are mandated by the Department of Ed. So there's certain mandated minutes that come with the students' proficiency levels for English. And we have kids coming in who just need, you know, a couple of check-ins in a week, maybe 45 minutes. And then we have students who speak no English, have no access to the general ed curriculum and need a more intensive 90-minute block. So we're trying our best to come as close to compliance as possible. And you'll see where we've reconstituted positions to add another position at our elementary level where the majority of the 130, we have about 80 students at the elementary level across our 4 elementary schools. And so we're trying to add additional support to meet the demand there. Right now we have 3 multilingual learner teachers at the elementary level. And then again, as Doug said, we're meeting the needs where we can at secondary as well. I can answer questions, but I know you've seen this slide before, but really wanted to capture the increase that we're seeing in need on this slide.
Next slide, please. Rosie, I don't know if you want to pick up and give a summary of special education.
Yeah, happy to. So, like Kara said, I know you guys have seen this visual before, but we just wanted to include here the overview of programs that we have throughout the district and the vertical alignment at each level. So this is really just to highlight about overall, we have about 18% of our student body is a student who is on an IEP, which means that they're eligible for special education services. And so there's a wide range of needs within those 18% of students, some who are in a full inclusion classroom, others who are requiring kind of a small group setting with a special education teacher and a specific program that matches their needs as they're programming throughout their day. So as you can see here, we have 5 main programs, and we continue to do a lot of work on building program descriptions for each of these programs, working on curriculum, staffing and structures within these programs. So I obviously won't go into details about each program and the student profile, but this is really just to highlight the fact that we do a lot of work to build our in-district programming because our goal is to keep as many students in district as we possibly can. And if you move to the next slide, Christine, I can talk about how kind of the reality is that despite all the work that we're doing in terms of building our in-district programming, there will always be a number of students who we can't service in district for one reason or another. Maybe their needs are too high where it wouldn't make sense for us to kind of replicate a program for them when we can send them to a school that really specializes in the particular disability category that they have, for example. Or maybe or if we did replicate that within our school, they would be kind of there's no other students who are similar to them, so they couldn't be in a classroom by themselves all day, for example. Often these are students with more complex medical needs, higher levels of autism that our in-district programming can't service. So as you can see here from the chart, just to give an overview, we give a 2-year look back. We also have the numbers for FY25, which with an asterisk there that is always subject to change. It could change tomorrow compared to today. We just don't know. And then we give a projection for next fiscal year as well, again, based on what we know now, and that is ever changing. But just to highlight some of the overall trends, we can see that the number of out-of-district students throughout the past couple of years has remained relatively consistent. And we also wanted to include the average cost per student and also the range so that you can kind of get a sense of the fact that the average cost per student really is increasing. And again, that varies the reason why. And as Doug has talked about in kind of other meetings, there's often pass-through costs associated with these as well. So this is a number just for a student's tuition. There's transportation that we have to transport the students to their schools as well. That comes at a cost. And then there's also additional costs related to the tuition sometimes. Maybe if a student needs a one-to-one aid, for example, that's not built into the tuition cost. It's in addition to that. So we really just wanted to highlight the fact that the numbers have stayed pretty consistent, but the needs really are increasing. And so you see that average cost per student has increased despite the range of the minimum and the maximum being the same throughout these past years. I just also wanted to highlight, you can see the OSD rate of inflation. That means the operational service division. That is the rate that's set for the increase in private school tuitions year over year. So the students who are, let's say this fiscal year, we have 39 students who are out of district. There's a portion of those students who go to private out of district schools versus public out of district schools. So a public out of district school is a collaborative, for example, we're a part of SEAM Collaborative. That would be a public school. They don't follow the same OSD rate. That's just for the private school. So we've highlighted this in previous meetings where you can see in FY24, there was a really high OSD increase rate of inflation of 14%. And all of the years prior, it really hovered around the 2.5%, 3%. And so fiscal year 24, I know I can speak anecdotally, talking to other special ed directors and hearing from other districts, the increase in district tuition costs that year really had a lot of other districts struggling. And I think that we didn't have to kind of go into our special education stabilization fund or come back to the town to say we can't, account for this 14% increase, because I think of the strategic budgeting that we've been doing in collaboration with Christine. And we really just wanted to highlight the two revenue sources that we use in order to fund the out-of-district tuition placements, being the local budget, of course, and then the circuit breaker, which is a special revenue account, not a revolving account, that we wanted to highlight here. And that basically means if a student has an out-of-district tuition cost that is high, above a certain threshold, this year is about $55,000, then we get reimbursed for a percentage over that threshold, about 75%. So I know we talk about a lot of like knowns and unknowns. Like I said, these are all subject to change. For example, if a student moves into Wakefield, we would take over their tuition costs. Again, there's more nuances associated with whether they're coming from a private or public out of district school as to if we take over the tuition immediately. But these are all the kind of knowns and unknowns associated with out of district tuition costs, which I know is a heavy hit on the budget. But I just kind of wanted to highlight the numbers for you guys, the change in trends that we're seeing, and the revenue sources that we use to account for those the best that we can.
So I'd also like to add, so that in the business of private placements or private schools, what often happens is if we have a student that we cannot educate in district and we place them at a school, what will sometimes happen is the school that's receiving that child will say, not a problem, would love to have this family come here, it's a match, we think we know what the costs are, great. And then they'll say kind of in the last kind of moments, as we're kind of squaring this all away, there might be additional costs for transportation or for kind of additional therapies that might be needed and on the service grid, we're going to kind of charge you an a la carte service for these things, which is how schools are kind of driving up or accommodating for their rising costs as well, right? So Rosie's been pretty keen on making sure that the agreements that we're making are kind of rock solid and we're not getting stuck in that space. But there are added costs that are now being passed on in ways that weren't being passed on 2 years ago. So that kind of the landscape is changing there as well. Is that fair, Rosie?
Yes, definitely.
Next slide,
And Doug,
please.
if,
Go ahead, Bob.
can you hear me?
I can.
So I just also wanted to touch upon her last bullet point about carrying up to 1 full year of circuit breaker reimbursement. As you can see, the change between 25 and 26, we're moving from about 4.4 to 5.19, almost 5.2 next year. We're only going to be able to carry forward about $500,000 in circuit breaker between 25 and 26. This is the first year in a while that we haven't carried up to a full year of reimbursement. So that's factored into our ask of the tax levy for the increase for special education, but we're not even carrying forward a full year of circuit breaker reimbursement till next year. So I just think that's important to point out.
Thank you.
Yep. And the next, yeah, I'll take this. The next one, we're talking about what are the four, I like to call it the four pillars of this budget. Really, what are the four cost drivers of this budget? We've communicated this in our budget video, in our slides, and when we've communicated to various groups over in Wakefield. But salaries are our biggest driver. We've looked at all of our offsets. How can we reduce the ask to the tax levy in order to make sure that we're in agreement with all our collective bargaining agreements? So our salaries are growing after the offsets to all of our revolving accounts and all of our grants. Salaries to the local budget are growing at 5.15%. Utilities are continuing to grow year over year. We just went out to bid for our transportation contract. That's a 10% increase to the local budget next year. And our out-of-district costs that Rosie was just talking about. Now, when we fund that, we do a combination of prepays, if there's any money left over in the fiscal 25 budget, and we look at circuit breaker and the local budget. Those three areas fund our total out-of-district tuition costs. But it's just important to note that even though our numbers are staying the same, we're growing from 4.4 to almost 5.2 next year. So we're trying to make sure that we can withstand that without actually to go into the stabilization fund. But those are the four large pillars of where the increase for this budget is from 25 to 26. And we've been talking a lot over the past 2 years about revolving accounts and what those offsets can support. So this is in addition to, we have expenses that come out of these revolving accounts. This is the cost of doing business. But these are in addition to that. We're looking at what my salary, what Doug's salary, what custodial costs, utility costs, custodial overtime, and capital purchases can come from those accounts. But we've talked about the 4-year spend down. I know we talked a lot about this when we spent the Saturday morning together, but that's only a 4-year spend down. Then we have to look about how to maintain those revolving accounts. And I know there's talk about user fees and how to maintain those programs, but we can't reduce the balances so much that there's not enough in the accounts to make sure we cover the salary costs for people who are paid from those programs. But for next year, we're looking at a $300,000 revolving account offset from 325 in fiscal 25. And then lastly, we talk about really year over year. What are we asking the town of Wakefield, the tax levy, to take a vote on May 5th at the town meeting? We're growing from 552,319,699 to 55,425,161 in fiscal 26. We've looked at all of our revenue streams. I mean, everyone's talking about how revenues are decreasing. We're assuming that our federal and state grants are fully funded. We're assuming that circuit breaker is continued to be funded at 75%. We've making a lot of assumptions about what we know right now in this budget. But all that being said, our offsets are decreasing from 300,000 in 325 in 25 to 300,000 in 26. So that's where we're asking for the 5.94 increase from 25 to 26. We can pause for any question.
Good. I was gonna share the spreadsheet I sent out late as usual last night. I don't know if people had a chance to look at it. Can you stop sharing, Christine, please? If you can.
I ask one question?
Absolutely.
Christine, a few of the assumptions, or I think most of the assumptions that you made right at the very end there, they were optimistic assumptions. I guess, what is the downside risk of any of those, coming in less than optimistic over the next year? And I guess that question is in terms of dollars.
I'm so,
God, you want to just repeat the question? Stefan?
Yeah, so there are a number of assumptions that you mentioned at the end of that, at the end of your statement. There were optimistic assumptions. Just as a for instance, federal grants. If those were not to come in during the fiscal year 26, what would the negative impact be to the balance of to the budget?
so I guess on the slide that Jim is sharing to the room, you can see the amount of federal and state grants on the spreadsheet. If anyone can see, we receive about $1.2 million from federal grants and almost $1 million in state grants. So we have just over $2 million coming in fiscal 26 from those grants. Now, of course, if any reductions were happening, we'd have to make some really informed decisions about how to maintain services with a reduction in revenue.
If I
But
may
I
add,
think at this point, that's a longer conversation.
Yeah.
if I can add, the amount that they received in fiscal year 24, the last year, was at 3.3 million. So from 24 to 25, they saw roughly a $1.2 million reduction in income.
Well, that's also
grants.
because in 24, we had the ESSER, which was almost $900,000, but ESSER ended in 24.
Right.
ESSER was COVID supported ARPA money, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
thank you. Does that help, Stefan?
Yeah.
All right, so, this document comes from page 78 of the book. I simply created a table so that I could look at it a little differently. Christine added to it for me. So you'll see the revenue change, the change in budget year over year, 5.31 from 25 to 26. Then that's what I would call the pure change from 57 million to 60 million, 5.31. Then below that, there is some offsets that are highlighted, that are explained, the circuit breaker, grants, revolving offsets, and those sorts of things. And so that number backs out about 5.4 million, resulting in the 55 and change spoken of a minute ago and the 5.94. So personally, I like this look because it helped me understand the actual and then the revenue sources and then the tax ask. If you find it valuable, good, we can enhance it as we go. As Christine noted, in the yellow, some of the my comments about the previous years seem like they were not quote unquote accurate in the book, and that has to do with the munis charged to the local budget minus the encumbrances. So I discounted that. That's why I only highlighted the couple of years in this particular sheet for purposes of what I was looking to try to look at. She spoke about the money that comes in from grants federally and state. Talks about those changes you can see there. And then the last thing that I wanted to sort of see was the revolving accounts. And you can see all of that, I guess you can. So Christine enhanced a couple of slides on a couple of columns on this, but I just took all the revolving accounts, all the budgets and the information from the pages, put it on one sheet for myself, and took a look at what the budget offsets are. So the budget offsets potentially show this 600 here. But there's one item that these folks can speak of. There was the potential to cover healthcare, I think it is, school lunch, healthcare cost of around 300 grand. And that's yet to be approved by the school department, and somebody else speak up. That's how I understand it from the note.
That's correct, but I think it's been agreed to. I'm not anticipating any dramatic change at this point.
Okay. So the original was the 300. If you take that other 300 out, you'll see that that sheet obviously nets to the 300 that was spoken about earlier. And then what I couldn't reconcile was this this support from the revolving accounts, and Christine helped explain that you know, here the revolving accounts salaries are paid through revolving accounts, as you might expect, and that includes Wakefield Academy, cable TV teachers, as it describes there. So that's a 1.38 offset that's added on to the 300 or the 600, and then the revolving account offset was the 325 and 25. In 26, the change is I'll just go back to the top real quick. So one of the things that I found eye-opening, I guess, is it went from 57 to 60 million, about 5.3, but then the net ask is more because the offsets are less, and so the final number is that 5.94. Comments, thoughts?
So I went further, and for those that were there Saturday morning, this will be a repeat for those of you who weren't there. One of the things I did was look at the school related costs that are not in their budget. I looked at the healthcare, retirement, workers' comp, Medicare, OPEB, and unemployment, and figured out how those are impacted, you know, by the new budgets there, and what portion is schools. So for example, in healthcare, the school portion of our healthcare budget is about $9.6 million. And retirement's about $1.85 million. So big numbers, and it adds up to about $12.9 million in total that we're spending on the schools that it doesn't show up, you know, on their budget. And I went further with that and said, okay, what kind of increase is that from the previous year? Previous year for fiscal year 25, the year we're now, $11.7 million is those other related costs. And so when I add it all together, the total increase, if you think about it in total for the schools,
Fully loaded.
is not 5.94%, it's actually 6.7%, because those other costs are going up more rapidly for the schools, especially the healthcare, than their budget. I hope I didn't lose anybody there, but when you pull in those other benefits, the total for schools is close to 6.7% increase.
And to be clear, there are other parts of the town budget that also don't pay those costs in their direct budgets.
This is true.
Right, so the increases across the board for other departments would inherently be higher if we allocated.
Yeah, if we're looking at fully loaded costs.
Right.
Right, meaning if you eliminated completely the retirement budget and
Yes.
allocated it across everybody, for example, right?
Right.
So anyway, same numbers regurgitated a couple of different ways, but the subcommittee for the schools, Brian, any comments, thoughts?
I do. I mean, so we talked about a desire to learn more about the funding side of things on the school budget. And there's a lot that in my first year as the chair of the schools committee, I need to learn and continue to do. We talked about that there's a lot of great data on the DESI site. Ed had some terrific insights, which I'd like him to hold forth on if he is willing to do so. Things like monthly reports that are posted that I didn't know about on spending up to that point, things like that I thought were really helpful. We talked about how the schools have not hired staff with one-time funds. You know, they've been smart that way and not sort of saying, oh, we got this, we can hire staff with this stuff. They didn't do that, and definitely there were plenty of school systems who did. I'd like to talk about munis reports in particular. Maybe we can have a conversation later to talk about some of the data we can get there. We talked about how they've done a good job of taking existing available employment spots and reconstituting them instead of hiring new people. So as people retire or take other jobs, you know, they're figuring out what makes the most sense for that position. Obviously, salaries drive the overall budget number, and, you know, I mean, it's a huge percentage of their budget overall, and it's most of it contractually agreed upon. And, you know, we've talked in this body previously about, you know, really that whole negotiation that goes on with the school union, the teachers' unions, and how, you know, if there's anything we can do to help sort of fix that. And that they there's no new net staff in this budget. So that was sort of the range of things that I noted that we talked about, Ellie,
Yeah.
Ed.
I think you captured just about everything we spoke about, all the important points.
Yep.
I'd just like to say, I think this is a very detailed, compelling presentation, Doug. Much enhanced over previous years, and I appreciate that level of transparency.
Appreciate the feedback, Ben. I know you do this in another town, so hearing that from the different sources. Appreciate that.
I also just want to say I appreciate y'all coming in on a Saturday and entertaining questions and giving a presentation. I found it to be extremely helpful.
Very good.
If it helps, happy to do it, right?
So I did ask Doug, I played around with Munis. Till my wife told me to go to bed. And I figured out only a certain amount, and that's not 8:30, by the way, it's later than that, but, I had asked Doug about a per pupil, spend, I think, Doug, was that what I
You did.
particularly asked for? Did you have that?
I did. So the department that only has, up to 2023 posted. And they kind of break it out a couple of different ways. But for Wakefield, they have the per pupil at $20,657,
What year was that?
2023. I can send you the sheet.
I'll send it along, yep.
And it also has every other district in the state.
Right.
So you can kind of compare where we shake out, you know, which is always enlightening, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, some districts with 800 less kids with a larger budget. It's interesting. Think, oh,
Yeah. It's like a kind of thing, exactly.
but yeah, and it's also a little difficult to kind of tease out the total in district or total expenditure, because they include chapter 70, they include all of our federal grants. So that number is larger than the number we use.
Sure.
Could they also be including like these ancillary benefits where they actually would charge retirement, healthcare, that other districts could actually incorporate that cost into the budget?
Would districts do that?
Yeah, in other words, the numbers get a little skewed. If, for example, my numbers, 12,900,000 was in your budget, rather than your 54 million, it's become 68 million. Now your per pupil cost is just inflated because those ancillary benefits are in. So some districts might be doing that.
You'd like to think DESI requires a certain number by rules, right?
And spot on, it's gonna go there. 'cause the
It's
state
what
controls
DESI
this.
promulgates,
Right.
the variables in
No,
the
no.
review cost.
So you don't get the apples and oranges issue. Great.
You shouldn't.
Well, can I chime in that the DESE requires every district to file an end of year report? And in the end of year report, it's all expenses that are related to the schools, both funded by the town and the school department. So it does list all of those other costs for benefits, but they're just funded by the town, but it all counts towards what they call net school spending to make sure we're meeting our requirement there. But it also is what the DESE uses to calculate the per pupil expenditure, because it's the cost of truly running the district from both the town and the school department.
Thank you.
That's correct, yeah. Not reflected in the per pupil, but is reflected in a separate report. For overall spending.
Obviously.
Right.
Right.
I also have been having extracurricular breakfasts with Tom Markham, unbeknownst to nobody, or unbeknownst to anybody.
Most.
I've learned a lot of really interesting things along the way. And I just like, for example, the report at the end of the year was something I've never seen before. Or if somebody showed it to me, I didn't note it. Like not knowingly have I seen that report, and that would be extremely valuable for me and our committee to, look at each year as a way to sort of be able to compare what we budgeted versus what was actually spent in all these categories. A great resource, and I'm not faulting anybody. It's my own ignorance, but a lot of very interesting points learned along the way.
Yeah, our working theory, Ryan, is things are gonna get a little more difficult and easier in the coming years. So, the more practiced we can get in not only understanding what we have, but also what the challenges are to problem solve, right? And so, and I think every year we get a little bit better at this. And so in this year, I think we took another big step forward, right? I'm assuming we're gonna be on part of some type of surveillance call for the high school like we were last year. And we'll get the same type of questions around, do we collaborate with one another? Yes. Are we settling contracts? Yes, we are. Is everyone on board? Yes, so we're working on it.
Just, before I open up for questions, how many bargaining units are you currently working with?
We're negotiating with 6. We've settled 2 of the 6. So we've got tentative agreements with 2 of the 6.
Okay.
So we have 4 left.
Any other questions from, Finance Committee? Any hands? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think when you play with some of the DESI data, what I look at is, okay, what's our per pupil compared to other?
Yes.
In the range, and generally, we're kind of right in the middle. Of the other communities. I think the same thing with teacher salaries. Where are we on average?
Yeah. Second quartile, not third or fourth quartile. Thank you. Ed?
So I know it's a deeper conversation, as you said earlier. How many staff are carried on the federal grants?
27, I believe.
Yeah.
Christine, 27, 26?
Yes, 27.
It's a worry. People are talking about it. I'm sure we're gonna have to see what events transpire.
But we're not, but so goes one of us, so goes all of us. This is,
Correct. Yeah.
well, we will all be in this space, right? And which will, I think, mean that the state will have to support a remedy.
That's what we hope.
Well,
Maybe for the fair share, Edmund, right?
well, they've brought in more into that space than they had thought they would, so. And I know there are shortfalls right now with Title I that they're looking at. And they're looking at urban centers first, right? So.
Joe?
I had a question, it was just up there, but then it went away.
Put it back up?
Yeah, the budget offsets. What's the rationale for like one of the budget offsets for the building rentals? You almost took out the entire balance. It was 56,000 and you're offsetting 50, but another one has 517,000 and it's only 175. What is the rationale for the these budget offsets? I mean, one of them is 534,000 and it's you offset Wakefield Academy and it's only 75,000.
So we looked at the ability to pay. So we've been doing really well this year in building rentals. We haven't received all of the payments. We're still waiting for a few checks to come in. But we kind of looked at what is costing us the most money in terms of utility costs and custodial overtimes. So we did a year-over-year comparison about custodial costs, utilities, and things of that nature that's appropriate to charge to these accounts that are actually generated from these programs, and that's where we came up with those monies. But again, that is a declining amount for the next 2 years.
No, my question had to do with why on the academy, which has, you project a balance of $534,000, but you're only offsetting 75. Why, and
Exactly.
the other one was 517 at the preschool and you're doing 175.
Right,
What,
because the tuitions for the preschool will go up next year by the increases for the costs of those teachers. Those teachers are in a collective bargaining agreement, so we have to increase the tuition costs. So we did an analysis of what that program can sustain for the next 2 years in terms of offsets.
So ratio.
We've looked at some capital improvements to that program and things to help the Doyle School, which really wouldn't be able to sustain in the other programs.
So another way to look at it, Joe, is we can't take as much out of some as we do others. So for ratio and proportion, it's not linear. So for example, with the revolving funds for Doyle, those are paying salaries, where a larger chunk is there. Whereas we can charge back more to Wakefield Academy than we can to Doyle because of the way that those funds need to be broken out and used and what can't be used.
all right? It just seems why a little more offset couldn't have been made, that's all. I know we've had discussions about that in the past.
There's more, it's about 30 pages on this in the budget book. I know it's dry, but happy to have an additional conversation if it's helpful.
Okay,
We get others, questions? Any hands up, Steve?
None.
All right, well, appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the other meeting and for the presentation. All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. Yep. Thank you. All right, so we have, next, moving along would be, vocational schools. So I don't know if,
Liz is all set, Liz. Take over.
well,
Already elbowing me in the ribs, told me to leave. She wanted to take charge. Kevin's in the hospital and she's almost, I don't know, there's like,
Not the AC, you're saving
turned it off. Magically it went off.
The vocational school budget, we are recommending an increase of 100,842. These changes take place in Northeast Regional as well as Essex North. Northeast Regional, is increasing $74,947. Currently in FY 25, we have 101 students enrolled. In FY 26, 98 students. The increase is broken down by $5,288 for operations and $69,659 for debt service. We had been carrying a higher amount for Northeast Regional. However, last Thursday night, they voted a smaller amount and that was distributed amongst the communities enrolled in Northeast, and this was due to their certification of the excess and deficiency and carrying over 5% balance, which the state allows to carry. Northeast, Essex North, currently we budgeted 8 students in FY 25. There's actually 10 enrolled. So closer to the end of the fiscal year, Kevin and I will be asking for a reserve fund transfer for those 2 additional students. And 2 are graduating in FY 25. We are budgeting 9 for FY 26. So that's an increase of $24,510. And then there's an increase of $1,385, and this is for transportation costs. Total budget request is $2,659,327.
thank you. Questions?
Yeah, how much do you think the reserve transfer will be in June to ballpark?
Ballpark is approximately 40,000.
40, wow.
When does that get decided? That the enrollment normally?
Oh, for next fiscal year, October.
Up to September. Maybe.
Yeah, and then they could have a mid-year transfer in, if they have, a spot for someone. That's happened in the past as well, so, no, yeah, definitely, and, you take how many students are there currently, what their grade levels are, and then kind of forecast, a number of what you think will be going.
And obviously, on Govender in your packet, there was quite a summary. There's a letter from the superintendent, which had a lot of good highlights. And then I may dig back into that, the supporting documentation. There's a bunch of financial tables in there and things like that that I'd find very useful for the previous discussion. So take a look at it, if you haven't. It's quite extensive. I don't know if it was 80 pages or 60 pages, but there's some tables in there that I found beneficial. So, and as Liz spoke about, they reduced the ask from 7.75 to 693 because they sort of had to, or because they were in excess, which.
Well, what happened was, fortuitously, we, their cash got, excess and deficiency fund got certified for fiscal year 24, I believe.
Yes.
Fiscal year 24, and in the enabling agreement and under state law, they can only hold 5% reserves. Which kind of makes sense because they're just gonna charge all 12 communities.
The regional is here on behalf of.
Right, they couldn't like have a huge reserve amount in there and just keep charging all the communities, so, what they did is, they had to apply that, it wasn't they, so they applied it to the debt service payment for this year. We had anticipated this going up more this year, in the forecast, so this was nice to hear. This came down a little bit. The other item that I would point out is that, if chapter 70 goes up a little bit, and we don't know what chapter 70 is right now, and, maybe, at the end of the year, we'll be looking at, the assessment going to Northeast not as much because chapter 70 covered some of it. Now, conversely, probably no one's gonna move into the Northeast Regional. They're pretty full, for next year, but, Essex Aggie could get, or Essex North Shore now, could get someone in that just kind of jumps way up.
Do you know what the open date is for the VOC?
They should be, I'm thinking, it's possible they'll open up for the 26 school year. But they're a little bit ahead of we are, but not, I think Joe's had the whip over there and we're catching up, so it's possible they may open up a little, they were ahead of us anyway, but I don't know offhand. Do you know?
Not that far.
Not that far, you caught up, yeah.
No, we're almost, they're probably, the fall, if possible, the fall of 26.
Fall of 26,
We would be
we're gonna be
January
under 27, so, yeah.
Possibly, but maybe it's not for sure yet for them.
And the nice thing at this point about the payment of the borrowing for the Northeast is that that's on a per capita basis. So it's on number of students, not that the whole formula doesn't come in and chapter 70 follows the student there. So it's helps us out a little bit.
The other thing that's helping us out is that a year ago, we were forecasting the 26 budget for this line item to be $300,000 higher than what came through. We actually, it's a reduction from what we had a year ago.
Right. One, I will point out for years going down the road here, the VOC is going to be built bigger we'll have more students. So, there's a possibility that more of our students will go. But we won't know.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on the VOC? Yes?
Yeah. Do they have the same risk that we have with federal funding?
Sure. Everybody does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how they've been applying it offhand, but everybody has the same risk.
Anyone else? Very good. Next budget is Medicare.
The Medicare budget, we are requesting an increase of $57,655 over FY '25. This budget is solely used to pay the town's portion of Medicare, which is 1.45%. This is salary based, so it's total salaries. And the budget request is $1,087,850.
Questions, comments?
And salaries go up, this budget goes up.
In step. Very good. Next.
Town council. We are requesting an increase of $189,781 for FY '26, which is, that is over FY '25 for FY '26. The increase is broken down with $175,364 paid by the tax levy, $14,417 paid by water and sewer transfer offset. The increase to the personal services portion of this budget is $175,364. We funded half of Kevin's position, the Assistant Town Administrator Finance Director, in FY '25. So in FY '26, it's fully funded. This budget also is inclusive of the Community and Economic Development Director, the Communications Director, and the Strategic Growth and Development Planner position. We also had an offset to this budget of $74,264 in FY '25 from ARPA funds to offset the Director of Strategic Growth and Development position. And also it includes the Town Administrator position. And the expense portion of this budget is level funded. The main expenses that are in this budget is the advertising line item of $15,000. That's advertising for town council, town meeting warrants and newsletters and other miscellaneous. Also, $26,000 in professional services, which is the traffic engineer is the big bulk of that of $20,000. So the total town council budget is $896,226, with $793,499 coming from the tax levy and $102,727 coming from water and sewer transfer. Town council also collects revenues, mainly liquor licenses, and on average, we collect approximately $125,000.
Very good.
I think liquor license is another thing we should look to increase as we go forward.
Yeah. I did notice the strategic growth and development person is left, is that right?
Will be leaving, yes.
What do we call it? Was that the planner?
Planner.
We talked about it a
Yeah,
few years ago.
yeah.
She, I think, right?
Yes, yeah.
Questions, comments, town council budget?
Is that the one that did the 40?
48, yeah, 48, yeah. Yes.
Is there an intention to refill that position?
Currently, yes. It may wait for the new regime.
Yeah, both town council and town administrator.
We are level funding it.
Town manager.
Town manager.
Town administrator. It is being funded, correct?
Yes, we're
Yes,
level funding
we're
it
level funding it, yeah.
in this budget.
Anybody else?
And the amount for the new town administrator is a placeholder.
It's level funded.
We were getting a deal.
Damn right. Wait till I put my finance committee charges in here.
Okay, I don't see anybody else. No hands up.
No hands up. Thank you.
Okay, so that covers the budgets. Now, we have some articles. The first one is capital. think we have one or several representatives from Capital on.
You
Hi,
have Phil Ren,
Phil is on,
Phil Renzi is chair, he's on.
Joe is representing as well.
and Lori. We met with the capital planning committee during their voting process. Went over all their process. They were given a certain dollar amount for expenditures. They met that budget. And then after the vote, we all went to the Saturday meeting and found out that the school department was paying for one of the items which the capital planning committee had voted to pay for. So that was $125,000 for the two-way radios with the school. The capital planning committee then went back and met and added the Doe-Bear, Bill?
Yeah,
I
the
can't
rear
remember.
playground at the Doe-Bear, the new surface.
For the same $125,000.
For
So when those
125
two-way
was the
radios are
ask.
speaking, we can all go, they can go to the Doe-Bear and talk about the new surface all the time.
Nice.
The circle of life.
Yes.
Any other comments from the subcommittee? Okay. Phil, do you want to, do you have, I think, do you have a deck you want to run through, or what's your pleasure?
I have a PowerPoint. I don't know if I don't know how to share it. So, do I send it to someone or has it already been sent?
It's in everybody's package, so.
Yeah, I can
Okay,
get it.
oh, okay, you have it in front of you. Yeah, so, hi, good evening. Thank you, for having me. So Phil Renzi, Chair of the Capital Planning Committee. We're made up of, 7 members, myself, Dan Calori, Tracy Cleversey, Frank Conti, Sam Hockenberry, Garrett Murphy, and Shane McCarthy. As you may or may not know, we meet, generally in a bunch of meetings in the February-March time period every year. That's a culmination of all the departments starting to talk about their budgets in the fall. And then by the time we meet, we're given an initial set of requests. This year, our initial list had about $8.5 million worth of capital requests. And then the water and sewer divisions, which are separate from the tax levy, about 465,500, 466,500 respectively. We met again 6 times in a 5-week period and then met a 7th time to revote that $125,000. We evaluate requests based on rank from the department heads who we invite to all our meetings, and we ask them to set priorities and rankings themselves because some of these departments come in with a considerable list. And so we rely on them to help guide us in our discussion of these items. And so our budget this year was 2.153 million to spend on capital planning, which we met. The full warrant, I believe you may see, but so these are just some highlights. We control of votes we made for the FY26. We had police, 3 vehicles, 2 police patrol cars, 1 canine. This is an annual ask from them to keep the fleet rotating. A couple of years ago, it was 2 cars and a van, or we tried to keep 3 vehicles of some sort for the police department to rotate in. The fire department command vehicle was approved. This is something that's come to us a few years now, so we did find money to approve that for the fire department. The dump truck was one of the vehicles. There are several vehicles approved for DPW. Some were just broke and some were just so old they needed to be replaced. These, as you may know, vehicles when ordered aren't immediately sitting on lots. And so similar to the police vehicles or fire vehicles, once you order them, you have to wait. And so we one of the bigger items was a full-size dump truck with a snowplow. And then the senior center came in requesting a senior center van to help bring seniors to appointments or to shopping or to outings. So that was a great ask. We're very happy we could fund that ask. Some building requests. The library came in with a number of mechanical items that are at their useful life. We, based on their recommendations and rankings, prioritized the chiller and 2 rooftop HVAC units, providing heat. There were 2 other HVAC units and some other requests, but we took heed of their recommendations and approved the chiller and the rooftop units. The 2 large garage doors at DPW that you see on North Ave was approved, and then Town Hall replacing shingles and some foundation repairs. And then the Civic Center requested new tables. and we replaced a water heater water heaters at the Galvin and the Woodville. So other kind of miscellaneous, I don't know what the deck, yeah, so this has the new one, good. So the Doe Bear Playground, this is the rear playground. It's a playground mulch now, and the request was to install a rubber surface to make it more accessible and easier to get around. So we funded this, and the important thing about this approval that we were able to get in after the two-way radios were funded in another manner was we've been trying to do one playground a year. And so this really closed the loop on the playgrounds. And so what we expect to be coming up, in future are other sort of park or recreation capitals, but all the playgrounds in some way, either equipment or services, have been addressed in the last, I think, 7 or 8 fiscal years. So it was good to get this Dole Bear in. We did, you'll see in this list, the Walton School has an area, grass area, that they asked for funding. It was a priority. It's a mud pit now. It's a disaster to maintain the school. You can't really use it. So we approved that. The fire department asked for onboard vehicle computers so they can communicate with one another and get real-time reports. So critical, in today's world. So we funded that. A new sidewalk snow blower for town buildings, and a general $50,000 for ADA upgrades. We had funded the similar amount last year, which was used for various projects determined by DPW at that point. So yeah, that's okay. So our final recommendation for appropriation for tax levy is $2,152,966 under budget. I'd like to point out we came in, I think, $34 under budget. So we're doing our part to help put some money back into the town. Water enterprise is 307, and the sewer enterprise was 358,000. Any questions, or anyone want me to review anything I just went over?
Thank you. Lori?
Just a quick thing, just a little color. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but the senior van was an additional van, so we had 2, we added the third because there was a demand in the town for more of those services for seniors. So I just think we weren't replacing, they weren't replacing a van, they were actually adding to some of the services for seniors.
Correct. Adding a vehicle.
Dan?
Question on the leases. We got 372,000 on prior leases. And then we got 2 new leases at 60 and 60. So I'm assuming some of the 372 is dropping off. And I assume the $60,000 leases for the dump trucks are each 3-year leases.
Yeah, let me pull that up, Dan. 100%. There was 2 large vehicle requests in this year's for DPW that we're moving to the leases. We're being very conscious of the leases because we have 2.153 million, but it's less the leases. And so in years past, the leases were up there. And so we're looking forward FY26. When looking at those additional vehicles, again, it's trying to find my master roll up here. Yeah, 2 heavy duty dump trucks came in considerable, so we decided to lease those. 372, it drops off to about 243,000 in 27, and then 28 starts really dropping off to 133,000, and then 89,000 in FY29, which would give us more funding to use for the general list of capital. So we're very conscious about what we put on the lease. I think in the past it was an easy way to get larger items, but then it was eating up your money for the next year. So we're being very careful about what we're putting in the lease schedule. And so I think in a couple years, if we can maintain a conservative approach to what we lease, we will be able to gain more money to put towards town capital that way as well.
Yeah, so if I did the math correctly, you're dropping down next year to 240 on the existing leases, or adding 120. So at the end of 26, the lease total would be around 360,000, if I did my math right.
Oh, you know what? You are correct. Sorry, I didn't have, the bottom line, adding in the 60 and 60. Yeah, it's closer to 254,000, I think, is what Conway
in the
was showing.
packet, there is a second page to the runoff.
You do have that second
It has
page?
the leases on page 2, Dan, sorry.
Detailed, yeah.
LP
Okay, good.
schedule. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And you were right on, but 363.
363, 253, 8, and then 208, and then 120. So it drops off in a couple years. We just the pumper was on, part of the original 8.5 million was the pumper. So there, we kicked that back, and that's an article you're going to be talking about shortly. So, but for larger vehicles that aren't that much, a lease makes sense because we can get it and order it. But again, it just takes away from future spending on our budget, which is pretty tight. I appreciate seeing the 3% every year in the forecast. I think that's critical that we cumulatively increase our capital budget as much, understanding that money is tight, but it's so important to continue to improve our capital assets. And so I appreciated seeing that in the forecast.
So continuing on that thought, I don't know if you were around or part of the meeting at the very beginning where I talked about the forecast and the lack of income. If we had to push came to shove and we had to defer some of these purchases, I know that, for example, the library chiller is something we cannot defer because the library is considered a cooling center. So that's got to be done. But if we said, can you split it up between what we want to do effective July 1st of this year versus see how our numbers come out and do, taking a look at it in November, do you have the ability to sort of prioritize the 2.2 million?
The committee would have to go back to the department heads, Dan, and ask them. Some of these things is like the water heater is leaking. We have to fix it. The dump truck's broken. We don't have a working. A lot of these asks came down to the 2 million, which effectively was like 1.8 that we had to spend after leases because it was a dire need or it was like a safety issue. And so it was very difficult to get to our budget as it is. We would have to really sit down with the department heads and find out from them what they think they can limp along. But it doesn't mean, like, a lot of asks were deferred this year for HVAC, right? Like the chiller, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You're seeing what was approved, and mechanical expenses are going literally through the roof. Like, to buy a rooftop unit now compared to 5 years ago, you're spending almost 40. I'm seeing into much smaller projects and what I do, upwards of 40 to 50% more to install these mechanical units. And so, yeah, we could defer it, but then what? Then you're just piling on next year's, which already has a deferred list. So we could have a discussion if push came to shove. We did that in COVID. I think FY21, we were asked to cut from 2 million to 1 million. We did that. We never got that 1 million back, right? Like, we lost it. So all those projects kind of got funded the next year. So we're already behind. If something dire happened in the town and we were forced to do that, we would sit with department heads and come back with a list and probably some sad looking faces.
Go ahead, Dan.
I feel like, I can appreciate it because I was part of the original capital committee. And this was an ongoing battle for us as well. I think when I got on, our budget was $250,000.
Exactly.
Something like that. And the leases was a big issue for us back then because then it was over 50%.
We had lots of leases.
A lot for leases. So I can appreciate your battle. Let's put it that way.
And I think what Dan asked was not doing it, is holding back on doing some things until there is a more clearer income picture in the fall. It wasn't to take your budget and say, oh, well, we're only going to allocate 1 million now. I think what you were asking is just holding back on some of the spending where we could, in case revenue is worse than anticipated, for example. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be a discussion for the department heads. Like, we have no, as you know, authority to tell DPW when or when not to order their vehicles, right? Or the school department to when or when not to fix something that we approved. We don't have that authority. So that would be a larger discussion with town council to the departments about holding off on things that they were approved in all manners, capital or notebooks, whatever it is. So I don't think we would have the ability to do that for the departments.
Steve, what do you think from a process perspective? Is that, that is doable?
It is doable
if needed
to prioritize. Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Lori?
Sort of looking out into the future, did we start a conversation where or am I imagining this, where there might come a time where the capital expenditures get pushed off to the fall for this exact reason?
I think we talked about that then in the future.
In the future, that might be like a better way to do it.
I
Because
think you said some communities do that.
Yeah.
Some do it, and also maybe starting a capital stabilization fund to put some money in there and, you can't do that, every year, but maybe a year that's a little less, you put some money in there to kind of smooth the gaps. Yeah. The only problem with doing it in the fall is that you may never get to it. It's, if you do it in the fall, you save everything in the fall, then it's always gonna be, at the end of the line.
A rush
Oh,
to,
true,
Yeah.
true.
rush to make the.
Very true.
I mean, that's exactly what would happen. If you defer to the fall, you're gonna end up saying, well,
Yeah.
let's not do it. Let's wait till the next, I mean, I could see this being pushed off and off and off. And
Perpetuity.
we've done this a long enough time, the unbelievable number of years I've sat in this committee. And when we started, we finally got it to a halfway decent level of over 2 million, and we should continue that. Because otherwise, we're gonna end up spending a lot more doing a lot of other projects. And it's not appropriate. I know,
I do disagree.
I know you.
The fact that, we're always $1 million behind from what happened during COVID because, a lot of the ARPA funds were spent on capital items and maybe you like them or you didn't like them, but that is capital nonetheless. And we do spend a lot of money in our three, which is coming up next, on bonding big items. So I think we've done pretty good by capital, and it's been hard, but we've done it. We've prioritized it.
And
And it was 250. I remember those days too.
180.
100, it was 250 and,
80 before Dan.
so it was
Before Dan.
it was 250 and 180 for,
It's nothing before Dan.
Oh,
it was 250 and 180 were leases. So that's all you had, 70 grand.
Before Dan.
Yeah, Joe and Dennis go way back. Yeah, me too.
So I do get it, yeah.
I do recall, maybe, mistaken, but didn't, the DPW give us a 5-year look ahead for future?
Yeah, they have everything for more than 20 years.
As Joe and his predecessor used to
Yeah.
provide that, so,
I'll make sure you get that.
I'd love to see that again.
yeah.
I need it for the dog and pony show.
And we've pulled things like it used to have the high school on it. Well, now that's off.
Yeah.
It used to have the Galvin of it years ago.
Yeah, 'cause
Walton, we spent money on Walton redoing that. So, yeah,
Town council happened to ask for it. I
Yeah.
went to the meeting.
I have it. I emailed Joe to get that.
Yeah.
So we can send it out here too.
Thanks. Anybody else for capital?
No, just appreciate all your work, and I have nothing else.
Phil, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay,
Welcome to
thank
town.
you. Have a good night.
Thanks. Debt service. Okay, let's go.
Am I back on? Okay, I'm back. Kevin's not awake. Okay, debt service. This is a,
Oh, I can do it.
no, I got it. Oh,
Okay.
you want to do it? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go
No.
ahead.
Debt service is our annual article that pays for our bonds. This year, the ask or the motion will be for $9,548,150. Of that, $7,548,150 will be, we're gonna call it tax exempt, so it's 2.5 exempt. It's really, the bump is for the high school because we're starting to pay for that first 100, or for the 100 million we borrowed last year, on top of the Galvin. And $2 million right around that is for all the other items that we have. Public safety building, Walton School, turf fields, few years left on that, existing fire trucks, things like that have all been approved.
So my forecast, I've got a net of 3 million. Last year was 3,076,000, or this current year.
We're gonna be using about $600,000 in the debt service fund to cover.
So the 3,
Kevin's still awake, I'll ask him. Yeah.
So
the 3 million is still a good number.
for the actual non-exempt or exempt?
And I'm looking at tax levy.
Non-exempt.
So we're using a piece of the balance that's in the
Debt service.
debt service fund, so it is close to 3, but we're using about 600.
So 2 is a better number, maybe.
That's a big deal because
Yeah.
I've been using 3 million
Kevin, can
all
you
spring.
answer that? Or am I wrong?
No, we'd like to have a balance
Yeah.
of
There's-
about,
I'm sorry, there is the million that the town council votes. to
Oh,
put in with
that's it.
Appropriation.
I'm sorry, Kevin, you're absolutely right. It's 3 million, Dan. The million is the one that when we set up the account that comes right off without going to town meeting. Exactly. I forget that every year.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
That was the one that was created in the beginning.
Yeah, way Bill Phil Martin.
Yep,
Phil McCartney,
Phil McCartney.
So you're right on.
right up there.
There he is.
God bless his soul.
And he put 1 million under his picture.
Ed Bean, go ahead, Ed.
Just curious, Steve, any predictions from Hilltop on the rates when we go up to borrow for the high school?
I think there's, well, who knows what happened today, right? They're still under where we presented at town meeting, but I'm hoping, and I always go through this, should I ban, should I bond? I don't,
We'll go for the whole.
that's what I'm thinking. I'm gonna go for the whole thing. And not ban the high school, but
So Liz, can you send me the latest and greatest version of that debt service
Yes.
spreadsheet that Kevin maintains?
send it to me too.
Also, I was gonna ask, I'm hoping at some point we can calculate the impact on the taxpayer for the debt of school.
Oh, yeah, no. We have that, and I'll have Victor run these numbers too for next year. Yeah. They have come in less than we predicted, which I'm happy about. And we got more money from the state, so we're gonna end up borrowing a little bit less and rates are a little bit lower, so it's ended up good. Trying to look at when is the Galvin gonna be done? It's like, still way out. Still-
Yeah, wait a minute.
That was a 30-year bond as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but still a few years away.
Quite a few years.
All right, very good. Next.
That was a fight, right, Laurie, to get the Galvin done?
Next is police and fire.
Pilot, and the other, then.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was skipping over
yeah.
it. Jeez, this is not one that we want to skip over.
This is a good one.
Yes. So, WMGLD pilot payment of, $989,032.
And as Dan said, this is the last year of the 1.5% agreement, so I throw that to you guys to get more in next fiscal year.
Challenge accepted.
Thumbs up, questions?
Oh, well, you can do it.
Is there any hands raised there? No. Steven? No.
Hmm,
Next.
No problem.
Question?
no.
Do we have any leverage to bring to that conversation? About the 3%, 1%?
I mean, we do a lot together anyway. I gotta say that we do, but yeah, I think it's a discussion, with us and hopefully we can get, I mean, I thought 2.5 was a better number than 1.5, but I think we have to have a little bit more, will. I mean, I look at what the physical plant is worth, and if you taxed it, like a commercial plant, it'd be worth a hell of a lot more. I also we get the service and we do some chargebacks, some other things help us with, so.
29.
You actually have a valuation?
2049.
It was.
I think we haven't had Victor look at it. It'll be much more.
Have that in front of you.
Well,
And also,
that's what I thought last night.
Right.
to answer your question as well, when it comes to the light department, of course, they have a board.
Right.
So it's almost not the same as dealing with the school department, but as a board, and that's who they answer to.
And they're elected officials, correct?
Yeah.
Five.
Yeah.
29.
I'll send a request out over the summer to see who wants to join
Recreation bond,
going to visit WMLDG.
400,000.
So that's what I used to do in a previous life, so I had a lot of fun doing it.
You have to be on that too.
That was entertainment.
Nominate you.
That was entertainment. But anyway, we didn't get too far. We got one.
What if he can chime in?
Very good. Next.
Well, be here, Dan.
Police and fire indemnification, we are requesting, 125,000 and the funding source is free cash. I'll defer to Kevin if there's been any change in that.
650, right? Yeah.
No,
125.
That's for the indemnification is 125.
Sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
Is there a reason in the comments it just says fire?
Because it's all for fire.
Is it? Oh, it is.
Fire, yeah. Which makes sense when you look at the next task, which is also all.
Yeah, I know, I'm looking at it. So.
Yeah.
Kevin, 125 still a good number for police and fire or just fire indemnification?
Fire, yes, 125 for fire.
Okay. Great, wasn't sure if there was a change.
No,
We wanted that to come down.
Questions on that? That's Article 6, I think. That's how it is in my list.
Correct.
Next.
The next one is supplemental appropriations. We are requesting a free cash appropriation in the amount of $650,000. This is $625,000 to fire department salaries and $25,000 to fire department expenses. It is all for the fire department.
My one question is why free cash and not?
Because we need it this fiscal year.
Okay, yeah. There's no other vehicle that we would have done,
Reserve fund, but
Transfer.
it would exceed the reserve fund.
right?
This is overtime?
Overtime, because we had about 12 firefighters out this year, injured,
And one retirement.
and one retirement, yeah.
One retirement.
Yeah, this goes back to my comments earlier about, the free cash spend at 775.
Yeah.
And last fall, we spent 4.475 million. So it is, 5.3 million of free cash or via not regular budget.
Yeah, so that discussion that always takes place about the fire department budget and what the amount should be.
And right sizing the staff.
Yeah. We just can't
We
get caught
can't-
up.
We used to be able to cover it by reserve on transfer.
Now, we've done a supplement the last 3 or 4 years.
I mean, I said we used to.
Yeah, oh, yeah, years
We
ago.
used to-
It's amazing the amount of people we got out this year. It was just, every time I turned around,
Times have changed.
including fire chief was out for a heart
Yeah.
issue, which everyone had to move up, and that, created a lot of other issues.
Any other questions on the supplemental? Next.
The next is eminent domain, and we are asking for an appropriation of $1 from the tax levy.
Too much.
I actually think you guys already did that one.
Okay.
We did two. We have number 9 as a fire truck.
Total.
Yeah,
I'll,
Okay, I'm going in my list.
yeah, I'll do the fire truck.
Okay.
So anyways,
that's fine.
there is a 2,000-year-old, a pumper that was built in 2000. A 25-year-old pumper, a 2000 Seagrave, which we're looking to replace via a borrowing. This would take 3 years to get here. So this existing 2000 Seagrave is our reserve pumper at the main station. We try to have a main pumper and reserve pumper because, God forbid, it doesn't work and we can't go out to calls and what have you. So when we get our new pumper in, this will probably be about 28 years old. The average life for a pumper is 15 to 20 years old. When we bought the Seagrave in 2000, anybody who's been around here, Joe and Dan, remember what we paid for it?
$750, I think.
No, that was the other one. This
Oh.
was $310,000.
Oh.
We paid for it.
Should have bought two.
And we should have bought two. Put it in there.
One month, still.
I don't know why we didn't think of that.
We didn't have enough in
We
capital.
didn't have enough money.
It was at the weight.
So, after, when these go through, we're gonna be in, we have another backup pumper that's a 2006. So in a few years, 5 years, I guess we'll be looking at that one. But we're looking through is that the 2013 ladder will be all paid off in 2034. The 2017 pumper that we will have right now that'll be in service will be paid off in 2027. That's $100,000 a year. The 2021 pumper is $71K a year. That'll be paid off in 2031. 2006 is all paid. So we're looking at, Laurie asked that things fall off, we put them on. So that's what's happening in the fire department. It is necessary. It's, the last people ask, what can we do? We do sell them. Some communities take them. They want a backup to a backup to a backup. The last one that we got rid of a few years ago, we literally drove it to the city that was taking it, and it basically fell apart in their parking lot, but it was theirs for the few thousand they paid us. See you later. And this will be a bond, separate article. It's too much to put in capital.
So one of the things that some communities, I know Marblehead does this, when they get something like this, fire truck, they actually go for debt exclusion.
A capital exclusion, yeah.
capital exclusion. Any thoughts, any appetite for that?
For me, it may be something to think about the future, but right on top of a big increase coming in for the high school over the next couple of years, I think it's not that this would be a lot. Oh, perfect.
Right on point.
We've talked about that before, Dan, over the years. Yeah. That might be something that we were looking at as we go forward. Does solve your capital problem in the,
Was that a debt exclusion? Is that what you
a
said?
capital exclusion.
Capital exclusion.
Yeah. So what you'll say is that if,
Same approach.
yeah, but if you were to spend like $2 million in capital for a year, you know, for everything, you would say, okay, this is all gonna be above 2.5. So you'd have a 2/3 town meeting vote, which you need anyway if you're bonding. Then you'd have to go to an election. And it would put that $2 million on top of the tax levy, which probably wouldn't add a lot to each person, but
Bucks each person.
no,
That'd be for 1 year.
that's for 1 year and be gone.
Exclusion.
And be gone. Yeah, but Marblehead does do that.
Yeah, they,
Or had.
A 1-year event.
Right.
it's a 1-year event.
And you had mentioned too that the impact of the taxpayer for the school is going to be a little bit less than what we.
It will be a little bit, it will, well, I believe so. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen in the next borrowing, but I think so. Yeah. I know what we borrowed since is lower than we thought, for that 100,000, and we're having to borrow in totality a little bit less because the state increased the reimbursement since we were in there, so.
100 million.
Mhm.
You said 100,000, I'm sure you.
100 million, I'm sorry.
You're gonna write on the record.
Locked out.
No.
Wondering, I saw him go left. Not a good idea. He just knocked on the window. Brian.
Oh, that was right.
Continuing the capital exclusion thought, when
Make this up.
is the big hit gonna happen on the high school in terms of the increase in?
Well, this coming fiscal year 26 will be kind of half of the hit. And I think the other half will come in fiscal year 27.
So if we're gonna do something like a capital exclusion, we'd want to do it in 28.
28, 29, yeah.
Yeah, without, you know.
But it's something to consider,
Filing.
right? Put it in our toolbox.
Has Wakefield done one before?
Not to my knowledge, not a capital exclusion.
Here, no.
No.
No, no.
Not that-
Any other comments? On the fire vehicle? Seeing none. Article 13, Grafton Street.
Grafton Street, yeah, it's a $1 expenditure from the FinCom, that's why it's in front of you. I actually should have had Ann do them at the last meeting. She had them on her list and didn't, because I said, no, we don't have to do them. Then I thought, no, there will be $1. So it's my mistake. At the end of Grafton Street, there will be a drainage easement taken, and that'll be cost us, the consideration will be $1. On Butler Ave, this has nothing to do with the other Butler Ave issue. This is another drainage easement on a property, and in this case, it is $1, and we are actually shrinking the area of the easement because we don't need it, and it will help the homeowner out, so that's $1 for that too.
Any other comments on that?
All I got. I think at this point, I think every budget and article is in front of you guys. And again, on behalf of myself, Kevin, and Liz, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure working with you.
Good.
Right back at you.
Yeah, same.
God, we don't have to do it anymore. God, we don't have to do it anymore.
You get one more meeting.
Hallelujah.
Get me for one more meeting, Joe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, reserve fund transfer.
Does anybody need a 2-minute break? Is everybody good to follow along? Seeing none. Okay, so this is the point of the Finance Committee where we'll vote on everything that you've seen throughout the year. Joe does a fine job running down the list for us. And so we will
See that one, Joe?
don't need,
Them all out.
Okay.
I'll take votes.
They need it.
Yes.
Raising your hand in by a voice vote, and if there's anybody opposed,
I actually, Mr. Chairman, would like a roll call.
very good.
Sorry to do that to you, but where this is a hybrid meeting, I want to, I don't want it pointed out that we didn't do it that way.
In what way is it?
It was supposed to because of the law.
It's supposed to be a roll call.
Supposed to be a roll call.
Don't want to violate the open meeting laws.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm,
With watching.
Okay,
among others.
so we are going to start with the list of some of the budgets or the
Budgets.
budgets first, right? So that's the summary.
I
then.
move for total general government, the amount of $3,176,549. With available funds for $4,500 from tax levy, $3,172,049.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion before you for total general government? Motion before you for 3.176549 for general government, which includes $4,500 from available funds and $3,172,049 from tax levy. All those in favor?
Got a roll.
Sorry. You just told me I gotta do it. What did I
Right.
do? Ed Bean. Yes. Joe Bertrand.
Yes.
Bill Boudry.
Aye.
Stefan Chase.
Aye.
Brian Cusack.
Yes.
Amy Forsythe.
Yes.
Dennis is not here. Teray.
Yes.
Christian.
Yes.
Evan.
Yes.
Don.
Yes.
Dan.
Yo.
Jim Sullivan is a yes. Lori.
Yes.
Ellie.
Yes.
Unanimous.
For total protection of persons and property, the amount of $16,489,586 from tax levy.
Second.
Any discussion on total personal and protection of property? Seeing none, the motion before you is for $16,489,586 for purposes of total protection of persons and property. Ed Bean.
Yes.
Joe Bertrand.
Yes.
Bill.
Aye.
Stefan.
Aye.
Brian.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Teray.
He's on mute.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Christian.
Yes.
Evan.
Yes.
Don.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Jim, yes. Lori.
Yes.
Ellie.
Yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
For human services, the amount of $1,089,610 from tax levy.
I got 96.
Yeah.
96.
Read that one again, Joe, please.
On typeface. Here, Joe.
Oh, $1,096,610 from tax levy.
I'll second that.
Discussion on human services. All those in favor of human service in the amount of 1,009,000.
Well, roll call.
For those in favor of total human services, $1,996,610. Ed Bean.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Bill.
Aye.
Stefan. Brian.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Teray.
Michael type.
Yes.
Christian.
Yes.
Evan.
Yes.
Don.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Jim. I. Lori.
Yes.
Ellie.
Yes.
Unanimous.
For Public Works, I move the sum of $8,364,546 with available funds of $107,592 for tax levy, the amount of $8,256,954.
Second.
Any discussion, total public, for Public Works?
I have one point to make on that. I think we made it when we presented the budget that this does include the contract for the DPW workers. Union workers, it does. Which is a 2.5 COLA, that's it, for 1 year.
So the motion before you then is for Public Works in the amount of $8,364,546 with $107,592 coming from available funds and $8,256,954 from tax levy. Ed.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Bill.
Aye.
Stefan.
Aye.
Brian.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Teray,
Yes.
Christian,
Yes.
Evan,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Jim is an aye, Laurie,
Yes.
Ellie,
Yes.
thank you.
Water and sewer enterprise, the amount of $17,430,173. With water enterprise of $7,893,691 and $9,536,482 from available funds.
Second.
Any discussion on water and sewer enterprise? All those in favor, 17,430,000.
Well, roll call.
Opposed. Motion before you is
I'm here to keep you honest here.
reporting.
We hate to violate the open
There's a
meeting.
learning curve, right?
Numbers again, Jim, you need to miss this numbers.
You already said the numbers.
Yeah. The motion before you as noted by the numbers from Joe. Ed,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Bill,
Aye.
Stefan,
Aye.
Brian,
Yes.
Amy,
Well, you accused me of lying.
Amy,
Yes.
Ray,
Yes.
So,
Christian,
Yes.
Evan,
Lieber.
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Dan,
yes.
Jim is yes, Lori,
Yes.
Ellie,
Yes.
thank you.
Wakefield Public Schools, amount of $55,540,161. With $115,000 from available funds for tax levy, the amount of $55,425,161.
Second.
Second. Discussion.
Can we lop off $1 million?
Can we lop off $1 million? That's a discussion.
So what do you think is the total deficit, Dan?
1.7 million.
So the schools are just under half of the budget, right?
They're 58%.
Yeah, they're over it, slightly over half.
Because you think about it, if they did drop off $1 million, they'd have to cut some staff, which would then reduce those other line items, retirement, healthcare, Medicare, workers' comp, so forth. But if nobody else has any appetite for taking them on at town meeting, I hadn't made a motion. I'm just looking for any discussion. Does anybody else have any thoughts regarding reining in a 6.7% increase for the school budget?
Others? Okay, I think, for me, oh, Evan's got his hand up. For me, I would say, as I look at the, free cash and we are now teetering on and going to get below 10%, I think I will have more appetite for that. Yes, not today. My point. Evan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Dan's been painting this picture for like a decade now. And I'll spare you. I know we're like over 2 hours into this meeting, so I'm not gonna like sit here and give you the same spiel that I've given you for the last decade, but I think it's certainly better to make a decision now than to continue pushing it off. I think the longer you wait and the further you push this decision back, the more catastrophic the impact's going to be. You're seeing it across municipalities. I think Wakefield isn't as close to that crossroads or that sort of fiscal cliff than as some of the other municipalities in Massachusetts are, including some of our neighbors, where they're having to go for big overrides and they're dwindling their reserves lower than what we have, because I think we've done such a good job over the last decade and a half, 2 decades, building up those reserves and being financially responsible in a lot of ways. But I don't think that means we should push off the decision. So I certainly think Dan's notion here is worthy of some discussion.
Very good. Ellie?
I just have a process question in terms of when the schools go to budget. Who decides the percentage that they're gonna come in at? Is it something that you guys work in collaboration with on the town side, or did they come to you guys? Like, how does that work? If you said 5% next year, is that?
Oh, on the forecast?
Just, you
Well,
know, I mean,
we collaborate on everything. I mean, I meet with the superintendent, talk to him, 2 or 3 times a week anyway, meet, go to lunch or every other week anyway to talk about stuff. But per the charter and per our charter, number one, it's their number. And they're, I gotta say, when you see some communities are coming in at 12, 16%, I mean, they work with us to be reasonable. I'm not gonna say that they don't. But it's their number, it's their budget, school committee's budget. That'll be the motion at town meeting, will be their number. A finance committee will make a recommendation up or down on that. We work very collaboratively. I'm not gonna say we don't. You know,
Yeah, but unlike the rest of the budgets, the town council really doesn't have a vote on what their number is.
correct. That's a charter issue, yeah.
Laura, you had your hand up next.
I very much echo your comments. I have an appetite to, you see the freight train coming? And even if we had my personal opinion is even if we did this, we'd go to town meeting and it would get put back in anyhow, so it'd be kind of chasing our tails. But the sort of higher question I have is, how do you make a resounding comment that seeps through at town meeting that lets people know that we're not at a 5-alarm fire, but a lot of towns around are at 5-alarm fires. And we're kind of eating into these wonderful reserves that we've had, and we're gonna get there at a certain point in time if we don't change something or come into this massive stream of revenue.
So there was a time when, and I was chair of this committee, where I got up in front of town meeting and said, we don't have the money. And a recommendation by the finance committee was to reduce their budget by $1 million. And I went through the numbers and town meeting agreed and reduced the school budget by $1 million. Now, that was probably 18, 19 years ago, a long time ago. So recently things have, I think, have changed, but there are times when we have reduced school budgets and other budgets. We reduced the police cars a few years ago to 2. The police chief and others got up and said, we need 3. And town meeting went ahead and overrode our recommendation. So it's gone both ways. So
Gotcha.
It's not a slam dunk
Mhm.
by any means, but because it has happened.
For many years, the finance committee with the school department would come in with their number. And then the subcommittee, which is run by Al Palmerino, would come in with a totally more reasonable number. And eventually they would agree to it, to that number.
Yeah,
So there was never that fight at town meeting. But it was always, we always looked at it and took some of the money off. And I think it's, like you say, you have an appetite for it. I mean, I looked at those offsets, it made no sense. I mean, there's $500,000 and then one of the offsets, they're given an offset of 75,000. One of them has 500,000, they're given an offset of 175. Well, there's monies there. Now, it may not be the million, maybe it's a $500,000, I don't know, but I think that there comes a time when we have to take a stand, because if Dan's forecasts are correct, we've got problems.
The offsets, again, it's explained in that sheet, but there are a lot of salaries that aren't part of that offsets. And I've looked at it, and I'm not telling I'm right or I'm wrong, but the other question that we've continued to ask, we made perfectly clear, is what is your expenses and what are you charging the parents?
Yeah.
And I went to the town, I listened to the town council meeting this week for the purpose of hearing what they said to the schools. And one of the things that Jonathan brought up was, my kid takes the bus. If you got to charge me more to take the bus, well, that's a service I'm choosing to take, charge me more. Was basically his comment, and it was very well received, and I appreciated it a lot. Meaning, what is the full cost of this program called morning school, and what do you charge a parent? And that's where we need all of us to get closer to. That isn't going to solve 5.9, but it'll continue to help make use of available funds or increase more available funds, anyway.
Let's say even if the town meeting overrides us, we've made a statement to the town meeting, because that's what's important, that they understand that there's coming some problems ahead.
Yeah, and I think, just so I may, Laurie asked, like, what do we do? I mean, Dan does a presentation usually every town meeting, and it explains the finances and where things are headed. And I think people listen to it. I think they understand it, and I'm going to say they do. That being said, we've got to make it clear that, we continue to get worse. And I always want the messaging to be as correct and as clear as possible. So we're forecasting revenues, we're forecasting this, that. And you hate to say the sky is falling and then it doesn't fall, right? But that's one of our roles. I agree with you. But anyway, sorry, you had just hand up first, Stefan.
Yeah, I know, I think we went through this process last year. As soon as we have a vote and we say we want to reduce the school budgets, the school is picked on all the time. I don't think as a community it's ever going to pass at this point. Is
A reduction.
reduction. Yeah, as soon as this occurs today, if that happens, then the school board, everyone's gonna email all the parents to show up to town meeting. And it's just gonna get put back in. I think if we actually do want to save $1 million, there's plenty of other places across the budget to do that. When the police,
Budget across the whole entirety of the town.
the whole entirety of the town, there's a lot of other places. During the police and fire, we mentioned, I talked to them about, or I brought up the overtime. Overtime is insane. And to say that the fire department is right-sized, given their historical trend of having injuries year over year, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any financial sense whatsoever. And I know that's not $1 million that we could potentially save in that budget, but I mean, it's something. And I'm sure if we go through these with a fine-tooth comb and give everybody a haircut, that's probably a lot more palatable than just picking out the school, the future of the town, and saying you're cut by $1 million. I think the school has not played, but they have worked with us over the years, have provided, I think, as some of us have said, increased transparency over the years. And I don't see how this is a great benefit, or at least gets us to the end goal of saving money.
Hold on, Evan's got his hand up. Ed, but I don't know, Don or Ed was next.
Ed,
You can go first, Tom, if you want.
so, yeah, I tend to agree with the stuff on that. I mean, if you look at the salaries in the town, and you take the top 100 people that are paid in the town, you only have 1 or 2 people from the schools in that list.
Mhm.
It's not like people are getting rich working in the Wakefield school system.
And they're salaried, right?
Right. Yeah, and, I think I expected it actually to be worse this year, given the contract negotiations. Because of what was going on in some of the communities around us. And I think the school committee managed those contract negotiations fairly reasonably. And didn't have the local upheaval that we saw in some of the other communities. So, if you're gonna cut the schools, you either gotta do it through the contracts, or you gotta do it through the number of staff.
Yeah, see, the services are contracting.
Yeah.
Contracts rule the roost for the last X number of years, so we could argue that they don't do a good enough job negotiating, but at least the last few years, it's on your television screen. I think they might have done a pretty good job. They didn't go on strike. I mean, gosh, some communities. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Ed.
Well, Don really was making my points here. The bulk of this increase is the contract. The wanted labor piece, and we still have bargaining units out right now, including the paraprofessionals. That's a major focus of the Mass Teachers Association. So I got concerned with whether this current appropriation is gonna meet contract demands where they might be even coming back to us. But I think we have to look at this problem in a comprehensive way, and, Jim's point in terms of the revenue, we're gonna look at it from the revenue side, as Steve has mentioned, in terms of a trash impact fee, looking at all fees and permits, doing an analysis, bringing in some more revenue first, and Stefan is, more comprehensive look at the other budgets in the town, although I don't think there's much to cut from the other budgets, frankly. I think these are very tight budgets, just from what I've been able to see, but it has to be a comprehensive outlook. Plus, I couldn't vote for a $1 million cut without knowing what the impact is gonna be on the school department, because inevitably, I think that's gonna be layoffs. I think we're gonna wanna be in that position without knowing what the impact is, and of course, it gets to town meeting, it's overruled anyway, so I don't think this is the time to do that. I think we have to have a more of a comprehensive plan how to deal with this long range problem. It is a big problem, but educating the town meeting on the problem is very important, as you say.
We may find out what $1 million cut will mean if the feds cut their.
Absolutely.
Well,
We'll find out then.
that's a serious, if this
Serious services are gonna be cut. There's no doubt about it.
is everybody's talking about it. What are you gonna do if these grants are pulled? And I hear it all the time in my job.
Yeah. Evan, did you want to go? You had your hand up, put it back down.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
let the rest of the first timers go here.
Yeah, I was gonna tell you to sit down like Bill Carroll would do, so, okay. Terrain.
Yeah, I just wanted to convey, I agree wholeheartedly with Ed Bean's comments, and Stefan. I mean, I think I am very afraid of the large deficit spending that is, forecast. It does scare me, but I think, and this is why I didn't support this amended motion last year, is it just felt like we were cherry picking the schools. The schools obviously comprise a significant portion of our budget. I do think I do get the sense that they are trying as hard as they can, but I think if we take a more comprehensive approach, particularly this upcoming fiscal year, knowing the sort of the forecast, to figure out ways in which we can have cuts in other areas, and may include the schools, then I think we have a better argument at town meeting. My concern is we get before the public and we just took $1 million from the schools. And as far as I know, we haven't reduced any of the recommendations for any of the other budgets this year, and we did not do it last year. And that's why I would not be in support of doing it as well this year. Thank you.
Thanks.
Like Ellie didn't go yet.
Ellie's first time.
Okay.
I'll get Bill next.
Okay. I just want to echo what Trey said, Stefan, Ed. I do have the same concerns that Lori and Jim you've echoed. I don't think this is the right time to make that move. And I think, to your point, a comprehensive approach looking at revenue and other budgets at an equal percentage to say if we're going to cut, we should cut. I do think the schools have done their part to be transparent, and I appreciate that. If there's going to have to be cuts, that's the communication part of the first part of the budget, right? Like, hey, we're going to be at 5%, we need to be there. But I don't know if this year is the year to do that. And I think they've been pretty transparent this year on where they're coming in. So.
Thanks. Bill.
Yeah, I just want to say, I was going to say similar to what is being said. For me, philosophically, I don't see the point of going after the school committee or the school budget without, if we want real credibility in raising the flag about problems without bringing other budgets forward that we would have contributed to or suggested reductions. I really, I know, we don't have a chance on town meeting floor, whether it's symbolic or not. I think that we should be looking at cutting other budgets in some proportion to let the townspeople know we're not looking at one budget area, we're looking across the board. So for that reason, I can't support Dan's if it's a motion or initiative.
It's not a motion, it's a discussion.
No motion, just discussion.
So thank you.
So I looked at the total budgets and reduced every budget by 15%. Come up with $848,000, with $465,000 coming from the schools. It's just an exercise.
You mean 1.5%. I'm hoping.
That's 15%.
15%.
It was a
Your calculator's a little off.
15% reduction on the increases asked.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, all right.
Finish the sentence, Jim. So that it was a change of $848,000. It was just, I was running some numbers, doing some exercise. Just anyway, point of reference.
I mean, the issue though is if you have a person, you're not gonna cut their salary by, instead of, giving them a 3% increase, you're only gonna give them 2.5%. You can't do that because of the contracts.
Understood.
And you'd have to cut, like if you have a small department, that only has 2 people, then you're cutting one person, it's a lot more than 15% of the increase.
Yeah, and I wanted to look like a weighted average kind of thing, but I got too tired. I couldn't do it.
The real struggle is finding exactly what spot you're gonna take a piece on.
I mean, it's obvious if we cut the budget, there's service reductions, right? Let's be clear. I mean, sure, you might find $100,000 for a thing in some department that they don't buy, but in general, it'd be a service reduction, I would think, in most departments. Yes.
So just because we're having a discussion, just to throw it out on the table, I think, sometimes when there are changes like we have in the treasurer position this year, it's an opportunity to look at that. So I've spoken to several of the treasurer candidates and asked them specifically what they would think about making that an appointed position. 87% of the communities in Massachusetts have their treasurers as appointed positions, and most of them have combined it with the collector's position. So, I think particularly now with the new town manager coming in, we look at some of the administrative structure and say, do we have a finance department and all appointed? Do we have elected clerk? Do we have elected collector? Do we have elected treasurer? And do we continue that way, or do we get a appointed position?
Charter change.
Your bruises healed from trying.
Yeah, last time.
Are you kidding? That was horrifying.
So Steve, you had brought up the treasurer, correct? Or other?
We have tried to make charter changes in the past and it didn't go too far, but a different time.
So a charter change requires a review,
Yes.
Charter committee, a review, a vote,
town meeting.
yeah.
Couple-year process.
Maybe an election.
Easy. Couple of years,
Yeah,
if not
maybe.
longer.
Doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. It's just not that straightforward.
No.
Sorry, Christian, I think had his hand up.
Yeah, I just, real quick on schools, I'm like conflicted on this, because I think what I gleaned today, and I know it was a Saturday meeting, but it seemed like a lot of their increases were I don't want to say extracurricular, right? But it was the multi-language learners, that was a big increase, right? And then your special needs, special ed, right? So it's not a question for us, but I think that's an area that probably needs to be looked at wherever it needs to be looked at, right? Because that seemed to be the big driver of all the expenses. It seemed like the ongoing salary negotiations, as we pointed out, were well done and within reason. It's that growing concern of these special cases that require more resources and more, the ratio of resources there.
That was a real shock to me, and when she threw up 20% of the student on disability. It's
Well,
like,
not disability.
IEPs.
You can be dyslexic, you can
Yeah.
be,
I know, but
Even if you have speech problems, it can be very,
yeah, mild physical therapy.
But yeah, I just wanted to call that out, because it felt like, that is a new thing that they have to address. And that's a larger societal question, right? But it seemed like that's where the increase was coming from. So, on one front, yes, the 60% of the budget, and that's the easiest place to cut. But the other hand, you can't just take it from the school budget and take it out of that, because it's not going to be proportionally affected, because they're going to keep those services in there, and it would be cut from regular regular salary. So again, it's not our place to solve for that, but I think, you know, that's ultimately down the road where it probably needs to be solved, right? With those increases and.
You're gonna say, let's keep it on the schools. I was gonna, follow up on Don's comments about the treasury collector, but that's discussion another time. I think we should talk.
I think, if I could just add one comment before Laurie, I view a lot of these things as unfunded mandates, okay? And, the multi-language learners, there is money that comes from the state and I think the feds, I forget, but it's just never enough. And the special needs, to have the prices and things go up to the level that they are, and then have the House say that they're really not taking up some of those equations right now, and then they give $800 bazillion to the MBTA to improve that. And I said it to the senator and the two House members that, you know, when people voted on that, they were gonna get more money for the schools and more money for their roads. So people voted on it, in my opinion, for that reason. Not to bail out the MBTA, not to build a bigger building at UMass, wherever. You know, I thought it was, again, my opinion, it was sold as a homegrown kind of thing. Anyway, yes.
You took some of the words right out of my mouth. So if you have all these unfunded mandates, things that are required, special education, English, the English second language learners, which I know there's a different term for now, the contracts which we've agreed to. So where can you cut or where can you find this? To everybody's point, we're kind of on the same page for a multitude of reasons. However, the squish factor, if you will, and I asked the committee who met with them more frequently, was, is there more room on these revolving accounts? Because that seems to be, like, do you feel like after all your meetings with them, that on these revolving accounts, that they've tapped them for the amount that you folks think they should be tapped for this year? Or do you think there's more room to move this year, more room to move next year? To scoop some of that back in?
What I will say is that 2 or 3 years ago, there was no room for any kind of movement on the revolving accounts, and they were not to be touched.
Agreed.
And through repeated remonstrances from this group and others, they found a way to realize that there is a way to actually have some more appropriate chargebacks to those accounts for the resources that they legitimately use for the purpose of whatever it is that their revolving account. So I think we've made good progress there. What they project, if I recall correctly, is that if, like, they're doing what they can do now, at this rate, those accounts are going to be charged down over the next several years. And it's a question of making sure that we don't keep charging them down beyond where they can actually support the purpose for which they were.
So you guys are comfortable with, because if you're someone who didn't sit on the school subcommittees, right? You guys are comfortable with that because you've kind of done more work digging through the weeds there. Okay.
Would they, push some more administrative costs over? Yes, I think, but this is a gain. You got the health insurance, that's a big gain on the, on lunch. So it's incremental improvements here. I think they're making an effort, as Brian said, and, could they do a little bit more? Yeah, I think so, but that's something we can talk to them on because.
And I think, they've got to look at their cost their fee structure. Because
exactly
what they say and what is correct, and Jonathan Shines spoke about it, was okay. Eventually, you're not going to have any more money because we're helping out, and that's going to go away. And the response is, well, you got to increase your fees. You know, once you're done paying down, using up this excess money, let's just say, then you have to increase your fees so you can have a run rate. And then there's no excess money, but you've already absorbed this, and this, and the rate is now, instead of 90, it's 98 or 608. And that's where it has to get to.
Ideally keeping up with inflation.
Well, at a minimum, they haven't raised rates in many years. I'm sorry, was there anybody else before? Nope, go ahead, Stefan.
There was also an item that I had asked questions about regarding contractual services line item. There was some prepaid contractual services that I think that they are legally able to encumber.
I think this is the payment for the summer for special education.
So I did ask for additional information on that one particular line item that was not provided. Just wanted to.
I'll get that for you.
The other thing that I wanted to mention too is, and this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek question, I don't know what the possibilities of this are, but they said utility costs are a good portion of their budgetary increases. You know,
I just want to just quickly say, my understanding is that the biggest portion of their budgetary increases are for salaries.
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but they also.
They highlighted
listed a
three
few
things. They
other
did highlight other things, but
But they mentioned utilities and I was just curious, I mean, they had I think the solar panels are now up, Galvin,
They're not up yet, but they will be. They will be for next fiscal year.
okay. But then also too, I imagine they paid those utilities to the WMGLD. Utilities, I mean, is there any way for them to just not pay those anymore? Is that an agreement that? that can be-
It's a little bit out of my
WMGLD?
yeah. But no, they should be paid. I mean, we pay them.
But the question is, could they?
Then our bill would go up. What's the difference?
Yeah.
I'm just surprised that, you know, government buildings in the town pays for the utilities that it uses to the.
But it's not, it's a separate,
Doesn't give us an inequitable.
and they don't give us the money back and they charge us, then we have to pay them for lights. No, it all works out lovely.
I think it's an argument in the pilot.
It's an interesting question to ask.
Exactly.
Yeah, more questions asked there.
I just want to get Joe and then you, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, but I think everybody understands that what Dan has been forecasting, that we're looking at in the future here. Maybe what we've talked about here in the past 20 minutes, we should talk about at the beginning of the first 20 minutes next year. And say, look, we've got to do something. And we've got to let everybody know, not just the schools, but also in the other department, that we're not gonna just have an automatic, okay, just stamp it. Because it's, sorry, I didn't want to break your new computer there. But, yeah.
Board meeting also.
Yeah, those,
Everybody is there.
I just think it's better to have it here in the finance committee in the beginning, not at the tri board, because people will not agree to that. And to stick it to them, because that is what we have to do, because looking at what Dan said, there's troubles ahead.
Absolutely.
So that, even though I would love to make a statement at town meeting, but I've already made too much.
One more comment I'll take.
Is it me?
Yes.
Okay, number one, I want to say that the schools have done a really come a long way in using revolving accounts. And you saw those offsets in retirement for certain employees. You saw it in healthcare. Trying to think of, there was another one too. So that took a long way. A couple of years ago, I went to the school committee meeting and they said, well, we'll give you half. And I don't know, why would you just give me half? That sounds kind of crazy, but I took it. So this year, we spent a lot of time talking and I say they've really used that well. They've also, and I get you have to use revolving funds for the stated purpose, and I get that. But a lot of administrative stuff is used to do a lot of things, and they started doing some of that. So I think that's something we should really work on. And you notice in our budget, I mean, part of my salary, part of Kevin's salary, will be part of Liz's salary. We charge back to water and sewer because we spend, geez, I almost said Rick Stinson, Joe Conway's salary, part of that. So you need to look at that. But I do think they have to look at the revenue side. We do too on our side. The school does. I mean, that bus fee offset has been 115,000 for how many years now?
Bus fees?
The bus fee offset?
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, and I get it. People don't want to pay fees, but I think that's the world we're in. Laurie asked a great question. How do we kind of make that message? I think that Dan's, we call it Dog and Pony Show, which we'll be doing at the end of April. And you know, Dan going in the beginning of town meeting, I think really people listen and do that. Your forward that I'm hoping to get tomorrow, Jim. Can also look at that for the book.
Now we know the problem here.
And you know,
You up too late tonight.
I hope that people listen to my comments at town meeting, because we'll talk about that. I get it. And But I come back and I forget who said it right, earlier today. I think it was you, Mr. Chairman, is that my big problem right now is that I don't feel for the first time in a long time that local aid is a priority on Beacon Hill. And I think it used to be more of a priority, every administration. And we talk about unfunded mandates. I mean, those numbers are real. The number of children that are coming in that are English language learners or whatever it is now. We need more state help in that. And if we got the same as our surrounding communities got per pupil, which to me, we're kind of the same, right? We'd have 1 million to 1.5 million more in Chapter 70 funds. And I gotta say that delegation wasn't too happy with me. I really don't care. Because, hey, that's, my job is to advocate for Wakefield, not for these other things. So I think we have to be really vigilant and push that with our delegation there as well. But I think that you know, I meet with Doug all the time. I talked every standing meeting we had, as I talked about revolving funds. I mean, it was like on every agenda. And they did,
More satisfaction.
and they did come through.
We've kind of looked under
Kind of,
every.
and it's, I haven't delved into the other ones now. You know, when you're looking at some of those numbers and some that didn't go down, I haven't delved into those, but I know there's some that I could charge back for our fees on it, and we did. So, but I think that it's looking at all those items.
Thank you.
So, couple things. One is, this was a great discussion, because one of the things I really wanted to get is a feel for how this body feels about the budget, the school budget, all budgets. Because it helps me put together my dog and pony show, what I'm gonna talk about at the beginning of town meeting. Because I can bring up the fact that this body, I mean, our responsibility is to advise town meeting as to what we should be spending our money on. And way too often, I think, and I'm guilty of it when I was chair, is we get up there and all we say is, you know, finance committee approves this budget. And then we sit down. And I did it, Jim did it, Brian did it. I mean, all the prior chairmen would do the same thing. And we really don't discuss with town meeting, you know, the big issues, the big numbers and where we're headed. So I think this conversation for the last 15 minutes is a huge help for me in terms of putting that together. I'd also say that I thought the Saturday morning session was great. I think we need to continue that. And you were gonna put something together as a summary of that meeting. Did that happen?
I did lose all my notes, but I'll do it.
Anyway, for those that weren't there, it'd be great to get Brian's summary of that. So I think we should, as a group, get up at town meeting and discuss our thoughts on these various budgets. Because if it's just Jim and me doing this, it just doesn't carry as much weight. So I would encourage others to, you know, when the budgets come up, have a discussion, you know, relay your opinion about what's going on. Preface it by saying I'm a member of the finance committee and I'm going to speak for myself only. Jim speaks for the group. I will sort of speak for the group at the beginning, but I think the last 15 minutes was great and a huge help for me in terms of my communication town meeting. So thank you.
Back to the budget list.
There's a motion in front of you.
School budget.
Motion in front of you that I will take votes on is for the Wakefield school budget of $55,540,161,000 with $115,000 coming from the bus fees. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
No.
Don?
Yes.
Dan?
No.
Jim? Yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
So 2 no's, that would be 12 to 2. Very good, thank you. Next budget.
The library, I moved the sum of $2,088,525 with available funds of $53,018 from tax levy, the amount of $2,035,507.
Second.
Any discussion on the library? Motion before you then is for the library budget of $2,088,525 with $53,018 coming from available funds and $2,035,507 coming from tax levy. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Vocational schools, I move the sum of $2,659,327 from tax levy.
Second.
Sure. Any discussion? So the motion for the vocational schools is $2,659,327. Ed? Yes. Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Unclassified, I move the sum of $2,768,106 with $493,500 coming from available funds with the tax levy, the amount of $2,274,806. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
There you go.
Discussion on the.
Get that bigger.
I gotta figure out how to get this reader pane off and then I can.
Budget for the unclassified is $2,768,106 with $493,500 from available funds and $2,227,606 from tax. $2,274,606. That's why I don't repeat it, coming from available funds. Ed? Yes. Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Benefits and administration, I move the sum of $21,824,922 from tax levy.
Second.
Any discussion on benefits and admin? The motion is for $2,824,922 from tax levy. Ed? Yes. Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
MLD benefits, I move the sum of $3,027,938 from available funds.
Second. Any discussion? Motion is for MLG benefits, the sum of $3,027,938 from available funds. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Is a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Okay. That takes care of that group.
Need to do the total.
I don't think so.
No. Okay. All right,
Add up to it, yeah.
Article 2 was capital outlay. I move the sum of $2,152,966 and water in the amount of $377,000 and sewer in the amount of $358,000.
Second.
Any discussion on the capital outlay? So the motion then before you is for the capital outlay with those numbers as described. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Debt service fund, I move the sum of $9,548,150 with $7,548,150 of exempt and $2 million non-exempt.
Second.
Any discussion? So the motion is for debt services, the numbers as outlined. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Laurie?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
I move the MLD receipts of $989,032.
Second. Discussion on MLG pilot. GLD pilot. The motion before you then, as noted, is for $989,032 from the MLD receipts. Ed? Yes. Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie? Thank you.
Police and fire indemnification, I move the sum of $125,000 from free cash.
Second.
Any discussion? The motion is for the police fire indemnification of $125,000. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Supplemental appropriations, I move the sum of $650,000 with fire department, $625,000 for salaries and $25,000 for expenses from free cash.
Second.
Discussion. Motion before you is for supplemental appropriation as described with those numbers. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
In the domain, I move the sum of $1.
Second.
Discussion. Motion before you is for the eminent domain. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
Trash collection, I move the sum of $2,456,958 from tax levy.
Second.
Any discussion on trash collection? Motion before you then is for trash collection as noted. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan? Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie? You?
Salt shed design and permitting, I move the sum of $395,300 from borrowing the sum of $395,300.
Second.
Discussion on the shed. Borrowing the sum of $395,300 for the shed. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
You?
On a fueling island design, I move that we borrow $2.6 million.
Second.
Discussion on the fuel island. Motion before you is for fuel island for 2.6 million borrowing. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the Butler Avenue remediation, I move that we borrow $1.3 million.
Second.
Discussion on the Butler Ave remediation. That's a motion before you for 1.3 million to be borrowed. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yeah.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yep.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
You?
Excuse me. Back on the fuel island, that's actually for remediation for building it, not just design.
Yeah, that was for construction.
It's in construction, so as long as everyone understands that, I think you did.
I was thinking that's a design of 1.3.
Hell of a design.
Design that myself.
Just want to make sure the minutes will show that it was for construction.
It's actually not too bad.
Him like that, he's in the engineers love that. What the heck?
That PO cut tomorrow.
You would.
Forward.
On a fire pumper, I moved to borrow $1.3 million.
Discussion on the fire truck pumper. The motion before you then is to borrow 1.3 million for the fire truck. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yeah.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Thank you.
39 Grafton Street drainage easement. I move the sum of $1.
I'll second that.
Motion. Motion before you is for the $1 on Grafton Street. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yep.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
70 Butler Ave drainage easement. I move the sum of $1.
I'll second.
Motion before, any discussion?
Yes. What happens if we just give them 50 cents?
Yeah, half an easement,
Is that like half of a hole?
half of a hole.
You know, we're talking about cutting costs and you're gonna go this on us?
At 9/11?
15% of the increase, right? It's like.
Any other discussions?
What, cut the schools, but no, he's cutting at 70 Butler Ave.
Good finish. Motion before you is for $1 drainage easement for Butler Ave. Ed?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Bill?
Aye.
Stefan?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Teray?
Yes.
Christian?
Yes.
Evan?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Dan? Yes. Jim's a yes. Lori?
Yes.
Ellie?
Yes.
Anything else to vote on? That you're aware of, Mr. Town Administrator?
Minutes?
Yep. Nothing else to vote on for financial related.
No, I think we're all set.
So the only minutes I had in available, unless others came in, was the meeting minutes from March 27, 2025. Entertain a motion.
Second.
Moved by Dan, seconded by Dawn. Any discussion on the meeting minutes for our meeting of March 27th? All those in favor of the Finance Committee meeting minutes? March
Aye.
27. Anybody opposed? None, unanimous. So, subcommittee,
The forecast subcommittee got the minutes. I know they did not get in Govenda,
no, I saw,
Not on the list, but yeah,
my mistake.
all right, so we'll
That can be tabled.
table it
do
last.
it in June.
Yeah, you can do it.
Any committee comments?
6 o'clock starts at fantastic.
That's,
I agree.
I-
So noted.
Except for.
Do we have
people don't-
an updated number on the reserve fund transfers?
Unless he asked.
I just asked if I should let you all know about the
Yes.
potential
Yeah, what do we got?
transfer.
What do we got?
So as mentioned earlier, going over the vocational school budget, that's approximately 40,000 for those 2 additional students that were accepted. We also have in the building department retirement, so that's about 27,000. Town council. Did I say town council?
Town council, yeah.
Town council is 25,000.
And that, believe it or not, is for advertising. The warrants for the fall town meeting and the spring town meeting, because they have those zoning things in it,
Oh,
in them, which are huge. To post the warrant as required by statute is $17,000 for the spring town meeting.
Town clerk, $10,000, though that is for the election, and we will possibly receive, reimbursement from the state for some of that, but we still need to have the appropriation for that. General,
Early voting.
yes, general insurance is 40,000, and that was for Butler.
That was actually
Oh, the
for the rail to trail.
Yes.
John Spinello talked about that, getting
Insurance.
insurance to able to use the
Yep,
rail to trail.
Yep. Workers' comp, 20,000, and then we have Butler Ave at the end for 75.
Remediation we need to do this year, right away.
What was the total?
Right,
$237,000.
$1,000, right, out of our four.
We're
But we'll,
That's as of today. Things can happen.
yeah, well, I mean, we got, our budget's 400, so there's
Yep.
400 or 350?
400,
400 enough?
400, yeah, so we could return some.
which we're counting on.
Part of the 2 million.
Any other committee comments? So for me, attendance obviously is great from this committee. I appreciate it. Obviously, we volunteer, but everybody makes a great effort to make it, and I appreciate that throughout the whole cycle. We will likely have one more meeting for reserve fund transfer. This is Steve's last cycle through this committee. We will see him again for town meeting and at town meeting. And as I put in an email to all of you, I'd like to try to just get a brief gathering together to have break some bread and a quick drink somewhere. I wasn't gonna try to do it tonight. I knew it might just be a little late. But we'll see if the next meeting gets scheduled at 6 o'clock and it's a 10-minute meeting, who knows? Cause I know Steve's gonna wanna have his nights free and not be out with all of these wonderful people.
I enjoy this school.
I
Absolutely.
know you do, and we appreciate it. Thank you for everything. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Well done. Good dialogue tonight. Dan, thank you for bringing up important items. Appreciate everybody.
Jim, I need you to sign this.
You know,
For all.